Well, hello and welcome to the Being Formed podcast. My name is Adam. I'm the host of the show, and I'm also the president and the co-founder of a soul care ministry called LifePoint Resources. This podcast is a ministry resource of LifePoint, and I want to begin today with a simple question. What if the place you've been trying to get out of is actually the place God is meeting you? Yeah, most of us have been taught to think of the wilderness as something temporary, a hard season, something to survive, endure, and hopefully move through as quickly as possible. But what if the wilderness isn't just a season? What if it's actually the terrain of the spiritual life? Today I'm joined by Dustin Kleinschmidt. He's a pastor, writer, the author of a book called The Wilderness Way. And Dustin brings an honest and hard-won voice to the conversation around faith, especially for those who feel disillusioned or tired, maybe even a little spiritually homeless. He's not offering quick answers or easy solutions here. Instead, he invites us into something deeper, a way of walking with God that makes room for tension, for questions, and even for that space of silence. So in our conversation, we do talk about burnout, and Dustin shares a big part of his story with us. We talk about disappointment and expectations that are always shaping us, right? And even under the surface, we don't even know what they are until we realize it, right? And the kind of faith that can hold both hope and heartbreak at the same time. So, wow, if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and it's still not working, or if your faith feels more like wandering than arriving, this conversation might just feel like the kind of companionship you're longing for. So why don't we step into the wilderness together and welcome Dustin to the table. Well, Dustin Kleinschmidt, welcome to the Being Formed podcast. It's so good to meet you. I'm really glad you're here. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Adam. Thank you for having me. Super excited to have this conversation. Just in our little interaction so far offline, I'm really encouraged and really excited.
Yeah, me too. I sometimes wish I would hit record right away because there's some, it seems like there's some really good stuff there that we just kind of, well, we look at each other and go, you might have to share that again. So yeah, exactly. We'll go wherever God leads and the conversation takes us today. But I warned you about this initial question I want to ask just to get us started, that kind of deeper question, Dustin. And I'm curious, how is it today with your soul? How are you coming in here like on that deeper kind of level?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about it this morning, knowing that this question was coming, which is kind of funny because are you preparing an answer for, you know what I mean? It's a weird question. But I think my soul is, it's this simultaneous, or maybe even paradox of weight and delight. So, short story, yesterday, my daughter comes home from school. She's 14, middle school. And she's like, man, like this kid, Carter, that we all kind of know from the high school was killed in a car accident. Like out of the blue, 15-year-old boy, head-on collision, a car jumped a median, hit him and his mom. And I didn't know the family. We know people who know the family. So I didn't have a direct connection. But just sitting in the weight of that last night and thinking through what the husband is going through. They've got like 6 kids. 3 of them were in the car. Only one was seriously injured. Mom's in critical condition. But just thinking through what he's wrestling with. I don't know their faith status. So there was this. I sat in it for a while last night and grieved for them, and processed with my daughter. And like she didn't know him well, but she knows people who know him well, and just was reminded that. And we'll talk more about this, that this life is a wilderness a simple, let's go to a dentist appointment on the way to school turns into this dramatically life-altering moment. And in the midst of it, my soul, there was a weight to it for them, but also just that gentle reminder from the Lord, like, hey, like nothing is guaranteed. Yet I am present. And so even this morning in my journaling was praying for that family and just asking the Lord to be close to them, and that ultimately this would draw them near, not far,
Yeah.
not push them away, those kinds of things. So yeah, it's that weird mix of like, in my personal life, in many ways, things are really good, and
Hmm.
there's a lot to be rejoicing in. And yet just a half degree away is a lot of pain and suffering. And
Hmm.
so yeah, it's a weird mix. I still haven't figured out how to reconcile all of those
Hmm.
things at the same time.
Hmm. I look on behind you, I see some guitars. We've already connected over the fact that you have a worship ministry background, right? And I do
Hmm.
too. And you talk about how do you answer that question, how's my soul? It reminds me of that song that we sing all the time. And it is well with my soul. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's not true. You know what I mean? Like there's a sense in which it is well, but also is that the fullness
Yeah.
of what's going on, right? I mean, even as that song was penned, the man who wrote that, who could say
Hmm.
it as well, think about the heaviness of his heart,
100%. Hmm.
as his family had passed away in a
I think it was a shipwreck, and he was sitting, right. He was
yeah,
at the spot,
yeah,
basically where they had perished. Yeah.
yeah, and he was standing on another ship crossing over that area, and he penned those words. And so, yeah, to say it as well isn't to gloss over anything, but it's to say the fullness of our experience, like what I just heard you saying. There's a heaviness, there's a weight to it, and almost this sense of God saying, "And I'm with you."
Yes. And it's this, I think it's aspirational too. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? There's a part of it that's like, I would like it to be well with my
Yeah,
soul.
yeah, yeah.
And you see David doing this in Psalms, right? Like
Yes.
David, all in some Psalms seems bipolar because he
Yeah,
goes from the depths of the brokenness to yet I will trust, yet I will follow.
yeah.
And then he, throws in some smite my enemies while you're at it kind of stuff. Right.
Hmm.
So there's this emotional spectrum of the journey of following Jesus and living this life. Um, that yeah, sometimes I think we want to shift to the good part, like we want to
Hmm.
quickly kind of like resolve, because none of
Hmm.
us love sitting in those things. And
Hmm.
but that's actually, I have found that's been a really good spiritual practice for myself,
Mm.
through worship, through time of just not dwelling in a negative way, but just
Hmm.
even with what happened last night, but being able to sit in it and try and put myself in that family's shoes,
Mm.
and to help me, because I'm not a hyper emotional person, and so it helps me embody that, like I
Hmm.
want to feel a little bit for them and not just go,
Hmm.
oh wow, that stinks, and then turn on Netflix.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Mm. Wow. Dustin, there's a lot about you, a lot of things that you share in the book that we're going to talk about today. The book is
Hmm.
called The Wilderness Way, and there's a lot of accompanying resources you're putting together to go along with your wonderful book and your ministry. But I want to just take people kind of through a bit of your story. You
Yeah.
talk about growing up in a home in California shaped by a lot of instability and trauma.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then there's a part of your story where it's finding your way to faith. And then
Hmm.
and then this kind of call in the ministry that is pretty cool. I mean, that story, a bit of the story of your call. I'm
Yeah.
just curious if you can tell us more about your journey, how it led to where you are now, and then just begin to introduce to us your understanding of the wilderness. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I grew up in a fairly traumatic home. My biological dad and mom divorced before I was even 2 years old.
Mm,
He struggled with alcoholism dramatically,
mm,
all his whole life,
mm.
and so we had an on again, off again relationship over the course of my childhood. He passed away a
Okay.
few years ago,
Okay.
but he believed in Jesus, but he could never embrace the grace that Jesus offers him. And so he could never forgive himself for not being enough, i.e. for me or for whatever. So there was this constant, like, he made promises and wanted to be there and then would bail,
Mm,
or end up in jail, and then he would be sober and then he would be gone. Right. So I had this absentee biological father in many ways, and then when I was about 5, I think it was, my mom connected with a guy who really became functionally my dad. They were together for almost 12 years. until I was, well, maybe a little less than that, but until I was like 14, I think 13 or 14. And he was physically and emotionally abusive towards my mom, mostly towards me. He would yell, he would spank, but he wasn't like abusive beyond that scope. But what would happen was I would be a typical kid, and that would trigger him, and he would go off on me, and my mom would intervene, and then he would be abusive towards my mom.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so what I learned was to don't pop up, like just stay under the surface. So a lot of time alone in my room playing Legos, and it ultimately came to a head in a situation where my mom had intervened to try and protect me. He reacted towards her. The way she tells the story is she almost grabbed a screwdriver and stabbed him with it. And that was kind of like her moment of like, okay, I got to get out of this. And so we moved in with my grandparents, and she took a year or so to reset. And by now I'm heading into middle school, and I'm just your typical knuckleheaded middle school kid. And it's just her and I. She has an apartment, she's working 60-hour weeks. So I'm your typical latchkey kid at that point. We lived across the street from the school. So I walked to school, walked home from school, made my own dinner, made my own breakfast. She would go to work at 6 and not get home till after 6, almost every day. And I had a great group of friends, and, it was Lord of the Flies. Like we were all over the map. We had way too much more freedom than, 12, 13, 14-year-old boys should ever have. But we had a blast, and it was really good. And then in high school and in all of that, like I didn't grow up, there was no faith background. My grandmother was devoutly Catholic and truly loved Jesus. But I'd gone to a couple masses as a kid and was like, I'm good. That was just my experience. I was way too antsy of a kid.
Yeah.
And then, but in high school, I had a friend and I had a class together, and he just started inviting me to his youth group. And at first it was the whole, no, man, I'm not interested. And, that happens enough times and you change your tactics. And so he came at me with, hey man, I'm dating this girl and she's got a friend, and we're going to go to Six Flags Magic Mountain. Like, would you be interested? And it's like, oh, heck yeah. Like, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know, of course, like it's Christian night at Magic Mountain, and there's like all these bands, and, so the musical side of me, I hadn't started playing guitar at that point, but that I loved music. And so I go and I start dating this girl, and I start going to youth group, and it's like, wow, that's the best thing ever. And then the girl breaks up with me, and then I'm still going to youth group to Spider. And what would happen is that youth group would go to the Los Angeles Mission once every other month on a Monday night and serve the homeless down in downtown LA. And and so what we would do is we would prepare the meal. Our youth pastor would share a message to the homeless people. They would have to sit through a message to get their meal. And all of us kids would be sitting in the deacon's chairs on the side. And this is an old building, run down, but like your traditional giant pulpit, wooden deacon's chairs off to the side. And I still vividly remember sitting there, and our youth pastor obviously sharing the gospel. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I just remember having this moment where I was like in my heart going, I think this is true. Like whatever this is true. And again, I had no framework at all, no understanding of the work of the Spirit, no understanding of who Jesus was. Like it was a blank slate in many ways. And as we left that evening, my friend Tim went, hey man, like, what'd you think of tonight? And I was like, I think we need to talk. And gave my life to Jesus. And in that youth group found the family that I didn't have. My mom did her absolute best, but she was working from a deficit in her own personal journey, as well as just work and being a single mom. And, very like no really solid father figures, but I had a small group leader. All of us guys, I was in 10th grade at the time, so 15. All of us guys had the same small group leader. He was with us from their freshman year all the way through their senior year. And his wife led the girls. And we would do small group at his house Monday mornings at 6:30 a.m. And he would always say, his name's Steve. He would always say, hey man, I'll be here. The door will be open. And if you guys don't show up, I'll do my quiet times and I'll head to the office. And we would show up, and he would disciple us honestly and genuinely. And we would wrestle through scripture. We would wrestle through life stuff. We would pray for one another. And at the time I didn't realize how formative that was, but it really became a shaping thing for me. And it was weird how small a big church felt to me. This is a church in LA of, multiple thousands of people, but it didn't feel that way to me because I had this really rooted community. And so, I went through high school, went into college. That couple moved to Colorado actually. And then I became really good friends with the college pastor. And through some sin in my life being exposed, things I had still been wrestling with. When I was growing up, pornography was bathroom reading material in my house. And I remember being in a small group in 10th grade and someone confessing they were struggling with lust and pornography. And in my head, I'm going, oh, I didn't know that was wrong because I just had no framework. I didn't know. And then it was like that. Then the shame sets in and it's like, oh my gosh, like if I can't tell them I struggle too, because, I came to faith in Jesus. I shouldn't. So it was this mental gymnastics that I was going through. But anyways, some things got exposed. Some sexual sin in my life got exposed. And the college pastor, Dave, a really good friend of mine, came alongside and just said, hey man, like, I feel like you need some closer discipleship. He's like, why don't you move in with me, become my roommate, and let's, because I was living at home, but I had a lot of freedom and autonomy. And he was like, you need less freedom and autonomy. And so I did. I moved in with him. I had a job at the time, so I was paying rent, and we really dove deep. And in that, we were developing this kind of small group stuff. And I joked with you beforehand, I knew 4 chords on a guitar. He knew 3 chords. That made me the worship guy. And so we had this beautiful community of about, I don't know, all told, probably about 80 or 90 high school or college students. And at a leadership level, probably 20 or 30. It's where I met my wife. And we would, our house was where everyone hung out till 3 a.m. And it was, we'd read scripture and pray and worship together. And then we'd play board games until 2 a.m. And, it was just this really cool, idealistic community, but again, very formative for my journey, which ultimately led me into ministry. I was pursuing a career in music, and then got the opportunity to become the student ministries worship pastor at that church. Kind of a crazy story. Like I was on stage in a club playing secular music, and since like the Lord, like there's only a handful of times in my life where I felt like the Lord's been next to audible. And it was one of those moments, and he just said, okay, you're done with this. And so went home and told Dave, I'm like, I think I'm done with Rockstar. And he said, okay. He's like, I've been praying about starting this position at the church of a student ministries worship pastor. And he's like, I had thought about you. He's like, but I knew you were kind of focused in this other direction, and I didn't want to interrupt that. And so we prayed and we talked to our elders, and they shouldn't, given my lack of experience and a lack of any kind of clear direction, they probably shouldn't have hired me, but they did. They hired me full time. And we spent the next 7 years building this student ministries worship department, which was focused on helping middle school students get individual music lessons, teaching them music, teaching them a theology of worship, and teaching them how to work together in bands instrumentally. And then high school, we formed them into student bands and deployed them all over the church, and they would lead worship in different avenues. And some of those kids are now adults with their own middle school kids still playing on weekends in that same church, which is super cool. So I was in that role until the housing downturn in 2009, which ultimately, after 2 years of praying and searching and figuring out what to do, we ended up in Dallas, Texas, in the suburb of Dallas, as part of a church that was about 5 years old that had planted from near where we were in Southern California. Okay. And they brought me in as the discipleship and worship guy, and I did discipleship. The church was growing really fast, so we handed off worship pretty quickly. And then I just became discipleship guy and really poured myself into that discipleship ministry for 7 years. It's funny how the 7-year thing keeps happening. It is kind of a pattern, but and then out of that there were some interesting things. A year in, I realized that the leadership culture there wasn't as healthy as I had been used to, and it created some instability for me. The senior leader was passive aggressively authoritarian. So he wasn't like, shut up and do what I say. It was more so, hey, I'll pray about that, and then you never hear about it again. It was a little bit of that
That
kind
might
of
be
leadership.
worse.
Yeah, in many ways it is.
Mhm.
And I sensed that something, God's always given me a gift of, it's discernment, but I call it sensing the thing under the thing.
Mhm.
But I never knew what it was. I just felt tension, and would challenge and just say, hey, I'm concerned about this. And at what point the senior leader there was like, hey, if I want your opinion, I'll ask you.
Mm.
And so I knew right there, like, wow, I don't know that we're going to be here long term.
Mhm.
But the Lord was super clear, like, you serve and trust me with him. And so I put my head down and continued to serve for another 6 years or so. And ultimately that led to us planting a church about 30 minutes away,
Mhm.
which we did for 4 years. COVID kind of was the disruptor
Mhm.
in that.
Mhm.
And realizing that if we were going to keep going as a church, we were in essence starting over, which
Mhm.
was going to be a
Yeah,
huge burden on,
man.
20 or 30 people.
Yeah.
And as we prayed about it, decided, hey, it's better just to let it go.
Mm.
So that was like the first handful of things. And then while we were wrestling with what to do with the church plant, the senior leader from that other church resigned.
Mhm.
Originally it was said because of burnout. He had taken a sabbatical, come back from a sabbatical, and then stepped away because of burnout. And then within weeks to a month, it had come out that he had been having an affair. And it just decimated that church.
Mhm. This is the church
There,
you were working in for
yeah,
7 years. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. And, it had grown dramatically over the years. When I got there, it was about 250 people. When that all went down, they were well over, closing in on 1,000 people. And
Mhm.
it was thriving in many ways, which is so crazy when you think about it. Like, there was a lot
Mhm.
of really good things happening. And, when that all came down with him, um, as we were transitioning out of the church plant, some of the leadership there reached out to me, and we had been kind of in communication, and they asked if I could help them kind of think through how to take steps forward, because they were just struggling. All the elders had resigned. And so they were kind of rebuilding a leadership
Mhm.
team. And the guy that had replaced me was trying to run everything, and he was drowning. And it was
Mhm.
just, and so they were like, hey, could you come help? And so I stepped in. Initially, it was going to be like an interim executive pastor, just to kind of give them some stability. And it led to them asking me to come back full time,
Mhm.
permanently, as kind of part of a pastoral team. So rather than doing a senior leader singularly, we were going to do a pastoral team, which I was a huge advocate for. And I think it's a great idea.
Mhm.
We were doing it probably as much because we were trying to counter some of the previous narratives and
Mhm.
to protect the church against fear around even me coming in
Mhm.
and like, oh, is he just coming back to take over? And
Mhm.
it's all this distrust is going on. And
Mhm.
so wanting to really slow play that. And so stepped in, and I jokingly say that my key card had not even swiped the door the first time before it just went. It was chaos.
Mhm.
Budget was really tight. They had just built a building before the senior pastor had left. And they got the full brunt of the mortgage. At the same
Mhm.
time, COVID was ending. A large chunk of the church didn't survive COVID, a chunk of it. Another chunk of the church left with a disgruntled former elder who planted a church. Um, and so it's just all of that. And then
Yeah.
I'm stepping in, trying to help organize. And, it's funny because you're like, on one hand, you're trying not to move too fast because you're trying to preserve, like, hey, we don't want to move too quickly. And I'm getting on one side from specifically young leaders, like, hey, what are we doing? Why are we sitting still? We got to get moving. There's ground to cover. Are you incompetent as a leader,
Mhm.
basically?
Mhm.
And then on the other side, you take a step forward, and over on the other side, it's like, whoa, what are you doing? You're trying to take over. So it
Mhm.
was so dysregulating. And I made it two almost three full years. I basically
Mhm.
made it 3 full years by one day, and was in an elder meeting. And yeah, the some of the younger leaders basically said, we can't follow you anymore.
Mhm.
And said that to each of the elders in the room, basically, here's
Okay.
why we don't think you're a good leader anymore, and here's why we don't think you're a good leader anymore. And so I'm doing the mental math going, and we had that one of my co-leaders was in a really, really hard season and really struggling, and wasn't really carrying his weight of being one of the pastors. And so I'm bearing it. And so the original reason for that elder meeting was to talk about, hey, what do we do with him? How do we help
Mhm.
him, does he need to step out of his vocational role so we can get more support? We were wrestling with all that, and then kind of got crashed by these other two guys. And in the midst of all that, I'm doing the math going, okay, so these guys say they can't follow us, which means they can't stay on staff if we're going to be the leaders, because that doesn't make any sense. And so then what do I got to fire these guys? And I still have this problem, this challenge with this other leader. And I realized I don't see a pathway forward that doesn't just decimate me even further than I already am. And at the time I was probably head down, like we'll just make it to the next step. But I was so burned out by then and so wounded and tugged in so many different directions. I had really lost myself trying to appease everybody. And I got in the car to drive home. We didn't really even resolve anything. The elders basically told these young guys, hey, you tell us what you would do next, and, come up with a game plan basically. And that really didn't settle with me well, but I just kind of bit my tongue and got in the car. And I remember calling my wife and just saying, I don't see a way forward. And within 2 weeks, I tendered my resignation. I stayed through the end of the year to really try to do my best to help transition it, and hand it off. And then the real fun began, because what I thought was going to be a relief became a year, 2 years of darkness, where the book kind of came out of.
That's a big piece of your book, right? And that's kind of how you came to understand what is the wilderness. And so in the Wilderness Way, the book, you're flipping a common assumption, the assumption that the wilderness is something that you kind of enter and there's an exit. There's an exit strategy. But what I think what you're wanting to try to introduce here is, what does it look like in real life when the wilderness isn't some kind of detour off the path, but it actually is the journey. Am I getting this right?
Yes, absolutely. And it was born out of, I resigned, and then, I mean, I had never had an anxiety attack in my life. And all of a sudden, we're visiting a church, and I bump into someone who knew someone from the other church. And it wasn't even a negative thing, but all of a sudden, internally and emotionally, I'm spiraling. And we get in the car, and but at that time, this is how fatigued I was. I refused to drive anywhere. I'm like, I don't want to make any decisions. So like my wife would drive, and I would just sit in the passenger seat and stare out the window. So, I mean, and I'm a control freak. That's not me. And she was super gracious and all of that. But we get in the car and we're driving back towards our house. And I just said, I got to call somebody. And I had had counselors in the past, really good ones. But a friend of mine had specifically connected me to, or give me the information for, a counselor who had worked specifically with missionaries who had transitioned out of the missions field and that transition, and had been in pastoral ministry. And so I texted him immediately and was like, I need to talk to you. And so that began this kind of journey of like really discovering me and rediscovering me as I kind of went into that season. And what came out of it was the realization that I had had a subtle quid pro quo with God that I wasn't even fully aware of. So it's one thing when I do something wrong, I sin, and then there's a consequence, and it's like, oh man, I messed up. And I learned from that sin, and I confess and repent, and I move forward to the next, whatever it is. It was a very, very different experience to say, Lord, you were super clear that we were to do this. And we really tried to do it faithfully, not perfectly, but we really tried to be faithful. And I really tried to not be the dark side of me in so many ways, and it still didn't work out. And that was what really spun me out. And in that, what the Lord started to reveal was, hey, you have expectations of me and of this life that I have in no way promised you. And in fact, I've kind of told you the opposite a lot. And so it was, you're super disappointed, and you're spending all your time fixated on these disappointments, but every disappointment is built on an unmet expectation. So I want you to examine the expectations. And that became where the book came out of, because it was, as I was in the midst of that, I'm kind of I'm reading through the Exodus narrative, and you have Egypt, or Israel is rescued from slavery in Egypt, and they're told about a promised land,
Mm-hmm.
or they're promised a promised land. And then they spend 40 years in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that 40 years is partially because of disobedience, 100%. But it's also where God really forms them and teaches them about himself and stuff. And so as I kind of drew that out into my own journey, it's like, okay, well, I've been rescued from slavery. I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm no longer a slave to sin and death. And one day there will be a promised land, and every tear will be wiped away, and God's home will be among his people. And so what is this life? It's the wilderness. And so thinking of it as, oh, this whole life is the wilderness, meaning it's always going to be a mix of beauty and brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I had to let go of kind of the binary thinking of like, oh, I'm in a season of wilderness. But if I just figure out how to confess it, fix it, change it, mitigate against it, then I can get out of it.
Yeah.
And then things will be okay again. Versus going, no. Like the wilderness is going to be a mix of beautiful days and really hard days simultaneously. And where my energy needs to go in is seeing God in the midst of it. Mm-hmm. Who is he? Where is he? What is he doing? And slowing down enough and turning my energy from trying to get out of the wilderness to experiencing and walking with him faithfully in the midst of it. So that's kind of the core of the book.
That's good. Turning my energy from trying to figure out how to get out of this.
Yes.
Learning how to be with God in it, wherever God is taking us. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you talk about this binary, and what you're describing is trying to hold together two things at once. It's not to say, well, I'm going to give in to depression and this sense of like, this is as good as it's ever going to be. And, we're stuck in this until heaven. But there is a sense of like, no, we will suffer. We, consider it pure joy, James, chapter 1, right? When you face these trials. So there's going to be disappointment. And you also are simultaneously holding hope in the midst of that, in the midst of disillusionment and discouragement and some depression, no doubt.
Yeah. And it's not always, no, go ahead. It's not always the big things, like getting a flat tire when you're late for a meeting is the reality of wilderness, right? There's nails on a road, and in an ideal world, there isn't nails on the road, or, it's like, yes, it's the big things, and I'm not wanting to dismiss those, but the everyday wilderness like, I'm constantly bumping into things that are annoying me or frustrating me. And I don't know, like from my personality, in a weird way, do better with the big things than the little things. And maybe it's because I know I can't control them. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to have to trust the Lord with this.
Yep.
But it's the little things where it's almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts, where it's like, I'm trying to manage so much to make myself as comfortable as I can. And in doing so, I'm frustrating myself over and over again versus just seeing like, traffic, it's a little bit of wilderness life, it's just, and so for me, you're right. It wasn't so much being dismissive of it or even like wallowing in it, but it was going, no. Like this is reality. Like we live in the already, but not yet.
Yeah.
And this world is not our home. And there's an enemy who has some sort of dominion over it. And so all of those things, again, like it isn't like the Bible hasn't been teaching us this stuff. And so what all of that means is, man, in the wilderness, 15-year-olds get killed in car accidents, and it sucks. It sucks so bad. And it's okay to go, like in my journal, God, I don't get it. This makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't see any way that this should make sense to me or to this family. And dang it, like, come on. And it's okay. God wears big boy pants. I can bring that to him, whether it's my experience or other people's experience. And I don't have to sugarcoat it. And I don't have to paint a verse on it and say, no, it's going to be okay. And it's all, but I can be okay. I can be Job's friends before they start trying to figure it all out, when they just sat with him. And so I think that's what was so freeing for me was letting go of trying to. I keep on my desk at all times a Rubik's cube, and it's not allowed to get solved. Like my daughter's friends will come over and they'll solve it, and I'll grab it and mess it up. And it's an illustration and a reminder to me that I am not a problem to solve. My life is not a problem to solve. The people around me are not problems to solve. God isn't some kind of magical problem to solve. And it allows me to live in that gray, a little bit more settled, and to think, okay, in the midst of it, what do you want? What do you want me to see, God? What does faithfulness look like to today? What's the next right thing? All those types of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that again, that idea of looking to God and saying, God, what does it mean to be faithful, to be with you? Notice you with me today in the midst of this. What are some practical ways we can create this posture and hold this kind of a posture? I mean, you talk about journaling as one thing. You also talk about some kind of a reminder like that Rubik's Cube. But, what are some ways that we can, in the moment, almost be brought back into this reality that, yes, this is hard. This is the reality. And yes, God is here with us now. And what does it look like to be in that settled place with God?
That's a great question. I'll preface this by saying I am not a good sit stiller. I struggle. That's probably been one of the hardest disciplines in my spiritual journey to develop has been the ability to sit and to be still, and to allow myself, not to just run to fixing or an answer, but to allow myself to feel deeply and to think deeply. So I say this as someone who feels like I'm still kind of chasing that in many ways, and will probably spend my whole life chasing that until I can't get out of bed or something. And then I get to stare at a ceiling and listen to some music. But here's what I would say is, right now, just today, this week, this month, the Lord led me to Psalm 37. And I have been lingering there over and over and over again. And if you know Psalm 37, trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land. And I love the translation that says, befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord. He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your ways to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. Be still and wait patiently on the Lord. But it was really the first part. It's like, trust in the Lord and do good. So in my heart, it's like, okay, Lord, what's the next right thing? And the next right thing could just be still.
Yeah.
Dwell in the land, which is about being embodied present where I am. Tomorrow has enough problems of its own. I can't fix them anyways. And all they do is produce more anxiety. And so, yes, maybe I have a really hard conversation tomorrow, but what does tonight sitting and having dinner with my wife look like? Or hanging out with my kids, or like, what does it look like to be in this moment as fully as I can be, especially as someone who lives a lot in my head. And then befriend faithfulness. It's that, okay, Lord, what's the next right thing? What's that thing I want to do? And so, like, at a macro level, in the last month, that has been my heart's cry and my anchor. Do you remember the movie Groundhog's Day with Bill Murray? Yeah. So, like, for those who don't know, Bill Murray kind of lives the same day over and over again as a reporter. And spiritually, there's times where I feel that way. I feel like God teaches me something, I grow in it, and then a year later, I'm having this same conversation about the same stress, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the Psalm 37 thing came from. So journaling for me is a huge part of that. And not putting constraints on it of what kind of journaling I'm going to do, or what it's going to look like. Sometimes it's, paragraph after paragraph. Sometimes it's one or two sentences. And I'm just able to just say, like, hey, I'm just hurting. I'm frustrated. Like not like letting go of any kind of expectations. So those have been huge pieces for me. Journaling, worship is huge for me. Worship's the thing that stirs my affections for the Lord, and really kind of, it's kind of my heart language to him. Like for my wife, it's nature.
Mhm.
And so for her, it's going for a walk. It's going in our backyard. It's, it's those types of things that help kind of stir that affection for Jesus for her. For me, it's worship music.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, those are some of the things. It's hard for me to think of all the practicals. I've learning how to practice being more contemplative and just
Mm.
leaving space for that has been really difficult, but also very fruitful.
Yeah.
Um,
It sounds like you are noticing this invitation in that from the Lord to, slow
mhm.
down and when you come across those verses that talk about wait on the Lord or be still, you're going, oh, okay, there's something there because it slows things down, right? And I love how you said, what you're noticing is that you drop into this realization or understanding of this say way to be with God, and then a year later, it's like you find yourself dropping into it again, and you know
Mhm.
it almost at a deeper level. One of the things I thought I was kind of hearing you saying, a great quote by T.S. Eliot that just says, "We shall not cease from exploration." And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. I love
Yes.
that.
Yeah. And I think that's part of that is, I mean, is God's grace, right? Like
Mhm.
if on day one of following Jesus, he's like, okay, I'm going to show you all the things that you need to grow in. Like
Mhm.
that would, here's everything that's messed up in you
Yeah.
and about you. Like that
Right.
would crush our souls.
Right.
And so the fact that he is long suffering and so gracious and so patient that
Yeah.
he would give us agency, right? To walk down
Mhm.
roads and to run into the same walls and
Yeah.
to lead and to love and to not be there's a long time where I it was like early on in my faith where it was like I believe God loved me and died for my sins, but I also thought he was perpetually disappointed in me
Mhm.
because I couldn't get it together.
Mhm.
And so it's that slow kind of peeling back of those layers that he does, and most of that formation happens in wilderness.
Mhm.
My contention is all of it happens in wilderness, but it
Mhm.
is in those dry seasons, in the seasons where he seems silent,
Mhm.
in the crisis moments, right, the foxhole moments,
Mhm.
when we're drawn in new and fresh ways to him, even though like you said, it might be circling around to the same thing, but we know it deeper.
Mhm.
Like I know God's love deeper than I did the
Yes.
last time around this
Yeah.
block.
Right.
Tom Landry was once asked, what's the difference between a good football player and a great football player?
Mhm.
And he said about 12 inches, and he pointed from his head to his heart.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that so much of
Yep.
the faith journey, like we fall into the trap of believing that it's intellectual understanding versus
Yeah.
embodied presence and
Yep.
embodied wrestling. And so it's like, yeah, I can know, like I taught all the things that I've been walking through the last 2 years. I've stood up in front of the
Right.
church and read these passages and
Right.
said, and simplified them in a way that they're easily understandable and digestible,
Right.
and then can find myself in the very same spot going,
Yes.
why? And so it's so funny how much of this is this process of God kneading the dough of our heart and going,
Mhm.
no, I gotta get deeper. There's more there than that either I'm not letting him in on, or that just needs
Mhm.
to be curated and cultivated, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're talking about when things get hard, oftentimes we do want to push things back up into our brain and just rely on the
Mm-hmm.
things that we quote unquote know to be true. And out
Mm-hmm.
of that comes a lot of platitudes
Mm-hmm.
and even this idea of spiritual bypassing, right?
Yes.
So help us because I want to move this conversation now a little bit more into the role of community and how we're not in
Yes.
this journey alone, right? Um, just in this area, like how do we listen to one another? How do we support each other in this wilderness way without falling back to kind of spiritual bypassing then?
Yeah, yeah. The spiritual bypassing thing was huge for me.
Hmm.
One, seeing it in my own life, seeing it. I think it's a systemic problem in in Western Christianity,
Hmm.
especially. And the term was coined by a guy named John Wellwood, who was I think he was a sociologist, but he was studying Buddhist monks and how like their compulsion is to try and basically detach themselves from what they're experiencing. And I think there is a piece of that in Christianity where what we do is, like you said, we go to intellectual assent, or, it's those coffee mug verses that we want to paste onto things, both in ourselves and with others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is, I think we are more Martha than Mary more often than not. And so there is this, how do we fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And so like Job's friends that are a great example early on,
Mm-hmm.
where they just sat with him. And I think that we fight that. I fight it. I don't love sitting with someone who's going through a hard time, because then I got to feel it. And I got enough of my own feels that I'm dealing with. Right. And so there's that part of me that just doesn't want to, but that's the beauty of community. And empathy isn't experiencing the same things. It's experiencing the same emotions that others feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I may not have experienced the same loss, but I know what loss feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can sit with someone and allow them to express their whole heart. And yes, there may be a truth that could counter that hurt or that lie, even, but that may not be the space for it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see David do so well in Psalms is David says, "Take not your Holy Spirit from me." Right. And we're like, in modern evangelicalism, like, oh, we're going to skip that part of that verse because you can't lose the Spirit. Right. And so, but it's like, okay, yeah, there's a theological conversation to have there, but let's just talk about what David is saying. Mm-hmm. Like, Lord, my heart grieves for what I've done. Please don't remove yourself from me. Mm-hmm. Please stay with me. This is a man after God's own heart who had just murdered a dude and, at bare minimum, had an adulterous relationship. Mm-hmm. Many would say more. Mm-hmm. And so like that ability to go like, okay, it's okay for me to sit in these things for myself and just say, yeah, I don't get it. I don't like it. I talk about it in the book. On my 50th birthday, I looked at my wife and said, I kind of don't want to be alive anymore. Mm-hmm. And I told her, I was like, I don't want to do anything. I said, but I need you to know how I feel. And not like, wow, a couple of weeks ago, I was feeling really bad and now I feel better. But in that moment, to look at my wife, and that it was hard. Like it took, I'm saying this about myself, but it felt like it took some courage for me to articulate that pain when I'm the one who's been trying to hold it together and be strong and take care of our family. And, and I'm the guy who went to theology schools, and I'm the one who knows Greek and Hebrew, and right. And so to be able to just sit there and for her to just, she said, I'm sorry you're going through that. And, that, like, to me, like, we miss so much of that in community. Yeah. And I think that there's so much beauty there, for us to be able to sit with one another in those spaces.
Yeah. Speaking of sitting with one another, your book also has a workbook component. And I love that what you're doing is you're encouraging like deeper reflection and integration with other people along this wilderness way. So I appreciate the themes of the workbook that I've been able to identify, including the focus on this power of a healthy community, especially when isolation feels like the safe thing to do, or certainly the very tempting thing to do. If someone is listening today, Dustin, and they're feeling this isolation, they're struggling with hard questions, they are not looking for spiritual bypassing or platitudes, right? But they're in this wilderness experience. Where can they start, especially if maybe they've experienced this spiritual abuse from the church?
Yeah. First, I would say, blessed are those who mourn, for you will be comforted. That's Jesus's promise in Matthew 5. And God sees you. He knows. His heart breaks too, for you and for his church. Even when it feels like no one else knows, Scripture teaches that he does. And so a starting point of just knowing you are seen, that your experience of the wilderness may not be because you did something wrong. The reality of sin and brokenness is that we get it on one another, right? Like my mess gets on you, your mess gets on me. And sometimes that's not because I made a bad boundary decision. It is just the reality of brokenness. And so, not necessarily like it's very easy in the seasons, at least for me, in the seasons of hurt to kind of hurt to do the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and like, oh, what if I? How do I? And so, for starting there, that these things are real, and the pain you are feeling is real, and Jesus sees it, but it doesn't have to define who you are or determine how you move forward. And I know that's really easy to say. And it's a lot harder to start to implement, because the truth is, and I've experienced this in the last year or two, you cannot journey alone. Paul Tripp used to say, no one lies to you more than you do, because no one talks to you more than you do. So there's a truth in that I have to be willing to own, again, not because it's my fault and not because, but to know that left to my own devices, I'm less safe, not more safe. How do you engage that? How do you begin to seek out, especially if you've been abused in the church setting? I would say, one, it's okay that you don't trust church leadership right away. Like, I think that's actually okay. I'm not saying don't go seek, but I'm saying you shouldn't have to come in and just because it's a new guy that seems really nice, that you just come in going, hey man, let me tell you everything. I think that it's not unreasonable to be a little guarded, to take small steps, and to explore meaningfully. At the same time, genuine relationships, and whether this is with a leadership in a church or with friends in a community, genuine relationships are always messy and inefficient. Always. You will not have the depth of relationship without the amount of risk. Like there's a reality of risk that has to happen at some level at some point. And we experienced it, because when you leave a church staff, you don't just lose the church, you don't just lose the job, you lose the community.
Yeah.
At least we did. I mean, we have some friends, but I was so hurt by how everything went down. Like I still in many ways don't want to know what's going on there, and don't like, I'm still working through forgiving, and I'm still working through loving. And so then the idea of connecting to another church, it took me a long time. And pardon the expression, my BS meter is on 11. So I'm hyper attentive, and the church we're going to has been amazing. And the leadership has been more than gracious, and everything I've seen so far has been green lights. The biggest thing is that they're willing to say, hey, here's our red lights and here's our yellow lights, which is the biggest green light, because there is no perfect community. Right.
That's right.
And so for me, community becomes, and we're still trying to find our people in this new church and trying to find our place in a community. And it's messy. It's a journey, and you're, it's like dating all over again in many ways. But I would encourage people, don't let someone else pressure you into it. And at the same time, lean into it. Trust the Lord enough to lean in. And whether that's, jumping in on a coaching group in LifePoint, or like, it doesn't have to be the traditional thing as your first step. There are safe places to go where you can begin to explain, like, my counselor was a big first step. I wouldn't be going to church today, more likely than not, had I not spent a year really working with my counselor on not just what happened, but how it's impacting my own view of God and of others, and so on and so forth. So,
okay. Wow. Thank you for that. Some really good wisdom. I appreciate your kind of giving, I think, people permission to say, it's okay. Don't feel like you've got to come right in and have that, just unguarded trust. Boom. There you go. Especially if someone's asking that of you. Oh, be careful. Be careful of all the internal things, right? That you're sensing. Back to your book. And again, your focus on community. I just want to tell you, I love the subtitle on page 98. You can be my wingman anytime. You can be my wingman anytime.
I had to throw in some 80s references.
What a great reference, man. You did it. All those Top Gun fans know that moment in the movie, Maverick and
Goose.
Maverick and Goose.
Yeah.
No, it's actually Goose is
No, that's
gone.
right. Yeah, no, that is. It's Val Kilmer at that point.
Iceman.
Thank you. There it is.
They finally figure out, right, how to lean into community. Hard
Yeah.
won. They've proved, how to be for one another. And I want to just
Yep.
read a portion of this section of this book, though, for our listeners, if that's all right, because I love what you're saying about the reality of the Christian experience here. The Christian life, you say, isn't a solo hike through this wilderness life. It's a shared pilgrimage. And I love that language of pilgrimage, where we're surrounded by others who walk beside us, hold us up, help us move forward when our legs give out. It doesn't rush, it slows down. It calls us to notice one another, to reflect on how our lives might help lift someone else, to ask what love looks like right now for
Mm-hmm.
someone we actually see. And you go on and you talk about what that idea of spurring one another on looks like. And then you say this, you say that Jesus, he didn't build a movement around similarity. He built it
Mm-hmm.
around shared direction.
Mm-hmm.
He walked with his disciples. He ate with them. He wept with them. And in his darkest hour, he asked them to stay awake and to pray, not because he needed assistance, but because he wanted their presence. And you just said, even Jesus didn't choose to suffer alone. Man, I got to tell you, as we're closing up our time, I walked the Camino de Santiago this past summer of 2025, and I really picked up on the idea that you're talking about here, this shared direction. Starting out, on the border of France and Spain, we're all headed the same direction. And that was really interesting to me. We were all sharing the same vision and intention as we were meeting each other. We had different ideas of how long it was going to take us, right? But we all knew what we wanted. We wanted to walk all the way to Santiago de Compostela, right? And I thought a lot about that, about how this idea of shared direction impacted our level of honesty and vulnerability as we
Mm-hmm.
walked. We didn't even know each other. But here we are, like dropping deeply into deep conversation. And I think it had something to do with this shared direction,
Mm-hmm.
this sense of we are in this journey together. And
Yeah.
I wish that churches could feel like that.
Yes, 100%. And I very purposely didn't use shared mission.
Mm,
Not that we don't have a mission, but shared direction is less commoditized.
mm,
It's
mhm,
mutualistic, right? It is very much this. Um, we're on this journey, and we don't really know. Like, we kind of know the destination, but really, it's And I'm a horrible traveler in many ways. Like, we do road trips. I'm the like, we're going to charge through and get there. And my wife's like, look, a giant ball of yarn. And I'm like, we're not stopping at the ball of yarn unless I have to go to the bathroom. Right.
yeah.
But rather, so I'm the bad example of what that is versus that we're moving in a shared direction.
Mhm,
And in that, we're going to be at different paces. One of the beautiful things about Jesus is he always walked in step with where his disciples were at. He didn't run ahead of them and then be like, oh, what's wrong with you guys?
mhm,
Like, he walked with them. He at times let them out front. Like, you guys go. I'm here with you, but you get out front. You take
mhm,
steps. And then at times he would step in front, obviously, and he would guide and direct. So there's something about shared pilgrimage in that sense,
mhm,
that it's directional, to me, more so than missional in some
mhm,
ways.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Just look into your left, look into your right. You're not
Yep.
alone.
Mhm.
Um, and we're kind of choosing to suffer together.
Yes.
I mean, that's one of the interesting thing about like when going all the way to Spain to do this is like you're making a choice, right?
Yes.
Somehow we think though in our actual lives that um, that we have lost this agency. But what would it be like for us to actually say to God, God, I choose to be in this hard place with you and find the hope in it too.
Hmm.
I don't choose to, I mean, of course, I don't want it. We don't have to want it. We don't have to
Mm-mm.
seek it, right? But what does it mean to choose, to have agency to say, I recognize I'm on a path and I'm choosing to walk with you on this path in the midst of this. And so I'm wondering just, how do we find hope in this? This is kind of where I want to land the plane a bit of just what hope would you name for people who think maybe they failed
Mm,
because they're still in the wilderness, like it's their fault,
mm,
or just maybe any sense of like how to come alongside them. Dustin, you're walking along the trail. Here's somebody, they're struggling. You're coming alongside them. What does hope sound like?
you haven't failed.
Mm,
Um, Even if you failed, because um, confession and repentance is a form of obedience.
mm,
And so, even in your greatest failure, the thing it's all only you can own it, right?
mm,
And we all have those, and to varying degrees of consequence, but we all have those. You still haven't failed, and that's the beauty of the gospel,
mm,
is that in your failure you can turn and trust and rest in that you don't have to atone for those things. You don't have to fix them. Do you have to own? Maybe. Yeah,
mm,
there's probably some ownership that needs to happen, and that's part of confession and repentance.
mm,
And so you haven't failed. I'm um and as you wrestle in that, because it's going to be a wrestle no matter what,
mm,
God's there.
mm,
That He is gracious, He is loving, He is long suffering. Um,
mm,
David, again, a perfect example. Actually, even John or Peter, right? The great example. Like, these are men who deeply loved their Savior and could not get out of their own way so often.
mm,
And my one of my favorite passages is at the end of the book of John, and Jesus is on this walk with Peter, restoring him to ministry, and he asks him three
mm,
times, "Do you love me more than these? Feed my sheep. Do you love me more than these? Feed my sheep. Do you love me more than these?" And the third time, it says that John looked at him and said, "Lord, you know all things." And it was like John was letting, or I'm sorry, it was like Peter was letting go of trying to prove himself to Jesus. Like, no, I can do it. I got it. Like, I get it now. And just kind of went, look, like, you know my heart. Like, one of my
mm,
prayers that I pray more than anything else to the Lord is, you know my heart. Before this podcast, Lord, you know my heart. You know
mm,
that it's a mixed bag of motivations,
mm,
and yet I truly want to honor you and I want to love you. And so I would encourage people, come to Him with your whole heart.
mm,
It's okay to grieve. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to not be resolved, to not
mm,
have a clear answer. Find people that can walk with you and are willing to walk with you there.
mm,
And it doesn't have to be an army. It could be
mm,
one or two. As Scott Sauls says, it could be an expensive friend, a counselor, right? But you do need people who are willing to walk with you there. And know that it is a mutual journey. No matter how far ahead your mentor or good friend might seem than you, they're not. They're just as much of a mess. And that's the beauty of it, is
mm,
that all of us mutually together are, like you said, on this pilgrimage in the same direction,
mm,
towards the same reality that one day He will wipe away every tear and there will be
mm,
no more sorrow and no more pain.
mm, mm,
And until that moment, we have His Spirit. He's with us, He's in us, and He's given us one another, His church, not as an institution, but as a people, as a family,
mm,
to link arms with and to delight with. Like, it's not it doesn't have to be a slog. There's slog days, but
mm.
man, summer in the wilderness can be beautiful and hot, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been so good to spend this time with you, Dustin. And I'm sure
Thank you.
our listeners would agree. I would love for them to be able to stay connected to you, though. So, how can we engage with your work? And what are you excited about that's coming down the pike?
Yeah, easiest way to connect is through my website, dustinkleinschmidt.com. I'm going to ask you to do me a solid and put the last name, or put the link in the show
I will
notes,
do
because
that.
my last name is a bit. a bit much, but it's phonetic. And if you spell it close in Google, it usually finds me.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're good. But that has links to obviously the book and the workbook, as well as just if you want to reach out to me. Like I love having these conversations. It doesn't have to be on a podcast. I'd be happy to encourage and engage with anyone who's just wrestling with stuff, and happy to do that. I do have some worship music, part of this worship collective that we've developed, that's releasing songs slowly as kind of accompaniments to this wilderness journey, because we all have different heart languages. And so that stuff's available there. So that's the primary way. I'm also on socials, so you can find me on any of the social platforms as well.
The music is great, by the way, just really good stuff. And you even have a Spotify playlist you created, right?
Yeah, I did. Wilderness worship playlist.
I found it. It's really cool, man. I like it.
Yeah. That's kind of my on repeat as I'm getting through my day.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Dustin. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks again, Dustin, for your time here on the Being Formed podcast. And thank you, listener, just for hanging with us in this really important conversation. As you sit with this, I wonder, where might you be resisting the wilderness in your own life? What would it look like not to escape it, but to become attentive to God within it? You don't have to solve it. You don't have to make sense of it all today. Maybe the invitation is simply this, just to notice, to stay, and to trust that God is present, even here. The wilderness is not a sign that you've failed. It may be the place where something deeper is being formed in you. So thanks for joining me today on the Being Formed podcast. Keep walking the path. Christ is with you, and you are being formed. Until next time, grace and peace.